Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we have some very interesting things to discuss today. And the first is these Deadpool 2 reshoots, which are kind of only, hovering at the edge of the general conversation, right? And I've had a number of you tweet me about it and say, what's the situation with these Deadpool 2 reshoots? And you're probably wondering why it hasn't become a bigger story. And I think the first thing I want to point out is that kudos to Fox's publicity team for really locking this story down as much as they possibly can. They can't keep the conversation from totally going away, but they've done a nice job of quieting it down as much as possible. Now, it started when some guy started tweeting out that there was a Deadpool 2 test screening and the reaction was not good. And Fox threatened him with legal action because they assumed that he had been to the test screening and had signed the non-disclosure. And he was like, nope, I wasn't at the test screening. People who were at the test screening told me, so it's secondhand information. So I didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement. But he did stop tweeting, I think, about it for the most part. And so Fox, to their credit, again, has really been on top of this. But Josh Brolin himself confirmed that they're doing reshoots. So I saw a couple of people try and spin it that, the test screenings were great and this is just a horrible rumor. But you know what? It doesn't matter how the test shoots went, because bottom line, they decided to do reshoots for a film that comes out in just about 2 months. That's never a good sign. But it's not necessarily a bad thing for the movie at the end of the day, because Rogue One is a great example of massive reshoots where a new director-writer was brought on, Tony Gilroy, to redo Gareth Edwards' work. And it turned out wonderfully, and it's a good thing that Kathleen Kennedy did that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would rather have a good or even great last-minute movie than have the creatives and the studio write a clunker all the way to the end, Dr. Strangelove style. Kind of what Alex Garland did with Annihilation, by the way. And now he's headed to the smaller screen television, where perhaps he belonged all along. Now, Ryan Reynolds should be the most concerned about this. I think that as for moviegoers with Deadpool 2, let's just hope they fix it with the reshoots. And I'm very excited still to see the movie. But I think that Ryan Reynolds is the one who should be very nervous, because he kicked out Tim Miller in the belief that Deadpool only needs him, only needs Ryan Reynolds. And I'm sure, as I said, when I first started discussing, this Deadpool 2 news, this bad reaction, Tim Miller's probably smiling ear to ear right now. And maybe Ryan Reynolds shouldn't have insisted on, taking sole ownership of the sequel creatively. Because while you get all the rewards, as we talked about when he did this, you also get all the blame if things don't turn out so well. I also think it's interesting that while Chad Stahelski continues to make just great John Wick movies, right? He's stayed in the John Wick business. His co-director on the first film, David Leitch, set out on his own, and it's not going so well for him. Atomic Blonde didn't find an audience. I liked that movie quite a bit, but you can't argue with poor box office. And now Deadpool 2 is in danger. He better sign that Fast and Furious spin-off deal before the movie comes out. Maybe, he was in talks to do the Jason Statham, Dwayne Johnson spin-off to direct that. Maybe his team previously was like, let's wait till Deadpool 2 comes out. Maybe we can get a little more money. I'd be like, you know what? This just became a wild card movie. We don't know if the reshoots are going to work or if they aren't. I think that David Leitch would be smart to sign that deal, if he can at this point, with these rumors of a bad first test screening and necessary last-minute reshoots, while he still can. Because he doesn't want to be another Gareth Edwards, who did do Godzilla, then Rogue One, reshot and re-edited considerably by Tony Gilroy, and now Gareth Edwards has absolutely nothing on the horizon. Isn't that crazy that he made those two big movies and he can't get work? Although he really messed up both of them. To be honest, I wouldn't hire Gareth Edwards, but I wouldn't have hired him after Godzilla. And I have to say, Hollywood hires people all the time that they shouldn't. So the fact that Gareth Edwards' management team can't talk somebody into hiring him, that's particularly bad. So that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day also deals with people, I think, believing perhaps their own hype a bit too much. So the Russo brothers, are continuing to look forward to their post-Marvel careers, and of course, as you know, they have a production company that landed at Fox, which hilariously could ultimately end up back at Disney, if this deal is approved, the acquisition of Fox's entertainment assets by Disney. But anyway, they're starting to put this company together. They're getting projects, and they had a big hire yesterday of 2 new individuals to be co-presidents of Story, and that's their Marvel screenwriters of, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. And there was some talk about, you guys are going to be Suits now? You're going to be writers and Suits? And it's like, I don't know how much they're going to actually be suits. It just seems like they have a permanent screenwriting job, to be perfectly honest with you. And to get such a cushy job, they occasionally have to give notes on other people's screenplays. Like, you have to give a little to get a lot. But what I thought was interesting is there was a big write-up about this in Deadline. I'll put a link down below in the video description. And it was just crazy how the Russo brothers were trying to, and Marcus and McFeely were trying to say that, oh, we've learned so much watching Kevin Feige and Marvel that we're going to try and we're not saying we can, but we're going to try and replicate that success with our own production company. And if I were Kevin Feige, I guess you could say, if you want to be positive, you can say he should be flattered. But quite frankly, I'd be a little bit annoyed. I'd be like, this is how you repay me? Kevin Feige single-handedly plucked the Russo brothers from obscurity and gave them one of the hottest franchises of all time. To be fair, the Russo brothers delivered and were there for him when Whedon imploded, actually, to think of it in somewhat of a similar manner. So don't get too attached to any of your talent, Feige, I guess basically is what he should take away from this. But I feel it's not cool for the Russo brothers to feel like, oh yeah, we can do it. And also, I think they're not just being complimentary of Kevin Feige, which is great. I think that the real problem is that they're using that as a selling point for their new shingle. They're like, oh, you want to be in business with Marvel, but you're not making a Marvel movie? Come to the Russo brothers. And I think Feige should be like, what the? I just think it's kind of not cool, especially when they have no success to speak to, right? This is all conjecture. Now, their feeling is that what they're doing is they're putting the creatives in charge, right? That's part of the Marvel formula as far as they saw it. And I can tell you that they're already mistaken because Kevin Feige isn't a creative. He never has been. He's always been a producer. He's never taken up any creative responsibilities. I think at the most he's a comic book fan, which is where a lot of his good instincts come from, but he's not a creative. So, and I don't see any business hires for this company, by the way. At least that they're, saying great things about. I don't see a producing hire. I see a directing team and a writing team thinking that they can also produce. You're forgetting you don't have a Kevin Feige at your new company. So with all due respect also to the Russos and their writers for what they accomplished while they were at Marvel, a big part of Feige's formula is that he has extremely popular characters that he's working with in a shared cinematic universe. I recently did a whole video, put a link down to that down below to that as well, as to why Marvel continues to win. And a lot of it is Feige's strategy, but most of it is Feige himself. So again, I don't care what they do at their new company, they don't have Kevin Feige. And so far that seems to be, the winning asset. Now, what they want to do is they want to do a combination of small movies, elevated genre films, like John Wick, for example, and then also tentpoles. Right there, I'd be like, unless they're going to be all a connected Russo brothers cinematic universe, you're already not going to be able to duplicate what Marvel has. Now, the first big test is going to be the Electric State. The Russos are producing this. They won a bidding war for this book. It's a little Ready Player One-y, so we'll see if they can make that work where it seems Spielberg has not been able to. We'll see how Ready Player One does. I thought it was hilarious that it got such brave tweets out of South by Southwest, but then when the Rotten Tomatoes score came in, it was in the mid-70s. It's like, you guys are crazy over at South by Southwest. It's too much hoopla. I told you to take it with a grain of salt. But then also, Andy Muschietti and his sister will be, Andy Muschietti will be directing and his sister will be co-producing with the Russos. Let's see if it turns out. I think that the Muschiettis took a little bit too much credit for how well it turned out, quite frankly. I think everyone's believing their own hype a bit too much, and I think they should realize that the film industry is a team business and that don't underestimate what other members of the team contributed. All right, so I'm curious, what do you think of that, and how do you feel? Especially for those of you who are diehard Marvel fans, what do you think of the Russos trying to, to say themselves that they're going to sell, that they're going to replicate the Marvel formula with their company? All right, now also a little bit of a controversy that's starting to brew, which I want to shut down Fox style, like the Deadpool 2 situation, is that the producers yesterday openly revealed that Matt Smith was paid more money than Claire Foy for the first 2 seasons of The Crown. And everybody gasped when they heard this, and they said, but isn't she the queen? Isn't the show about her? And the producers then didn't help themselves by saying, well, from now on, the queen gets paid the most. Like they'd made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. They should have been very honest about it. Because here's the thing. It's a very different situation now than it was when they first started The Crown. So of course they can make a rule like that where the queen gets paid the most. It's just, I'm upset the way the story emerged the way that it did, and that's on the producers. And I'm upset the way it's been reported because people are not reporting it accurately and are, I think, this is the part of equal pay that gets convoluted and ridiculous, and why equal pay hits roadblocks, because people are like, equal pay is silly. You're like, no, it's not silly, but it's not we're not saying socialism here, right? It's still a business. So let me explain the situation with The Crown. as others should have. Well, first off, Matt Smith and John Lithgow are the only name talent for season 1. And a show needs name talent because it's new. And so the only way it's going to get people in is if, one of the safety nets is if the fan bases of said actors, I don't know if John Lithgow has like a fan base, but people are familiar with him and go, I like John Lithgow, I'll check it out, right? That's what you need. So that's very important. So, and while Matt Smith is not the Queen, by the way, I'm sure John Lithgow got paid more than Claire Foy too, and he had a smaller role because he's John Lithgow. But anyway, Matt Smith is playing the male lead on the show, and Prince Philip is not only a large part, but a very important one. I think, they, especially in season 2, I think it really is kind of in some ways both their show. But here's the big kicker. Matt Smith, again, was a name, but Claire Foy was nobody when she was cast, just like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, where people also were like, why did Gal Gadot get paid so little to be Wonder Woman? Well, here's the thing. These nobodies got lead roles, and sometimes the role itself is the payment, that they're willing to put a nobody in the lead role. And again, when you have a nobody in the lead role, having name talent in the supporting roles becomes even more important to back up that no-name lead. And sometimes name talent doesn't want to be supporting, so you have to convince them to be supporting to a no-name by offering to pay them a nice amount of money. That's just the way it works. Now, of course, going forward, again, the Crown producers have said, oh, well, from now on, the rule is going to be that the Queen does get paid the most. Well, you know why they can do that? Because their show is a hit, and suddenly being on the Crown is worth something to actors. But when the show was getting started, it didn't mean anything because the show had no success factor. It actually was having some trouble getting picked up anywhere. Netflix took a chance on it, and so Matt Smith at the beginning was doing them a favor, and that's the big thing here. There are a lot of different factors, depending on the industry, that go into deciding how much somebody is paid for a job. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to leverage. What do you bring to the project, and what does the project bring to you? And who can afford to walk away? Who does it mean more to for this contract to be signed? And so at the beginning, it meant much more to the show and to Claire Foy, by the way. She really needed to have this lead role on this big fancy show to get her career started. And so, of course, she took whatever was offered to her, as she should. That's the way it works. Again, this isn't like a socialist situation where they count how many lines everybody has and pay them. You don't get paid per line. That's ridiculous. And also, some people were like, well, why wouldn't she get paid more at least for season 2? Well, likely when she signed her contract for season 1, because they knew they were going to change out the actors after 2 seasons, they locked everybody down for just that first 2-season run. And so hopefully, if her management team did their job and if the producers were feeling somewhat generous, they might have given her a small raise per episode in season 2. But they didn't have to. Again, the role was part of the payment. And now she can go ask for much more money in her future projects. And I have to say, if she doesn't get some good future projects and no longer being on the Crown, she'll see how nice that was. And, that's why don't turn your nose up at a really good opportunity, especially when you're coming from a place where you had none. And I wish she had gotten more work. I guess at the last minute she got the girl with the dragon tattoo. We'll see how that turns out. They haven't really been promoting it very much, so it keeps slipping my mind. So, I mean, she did what she needed to, and she got a big franchise before she got off the Crown, but the Crown isn't there anymore as kind of like a foundation for her career. So hopefully, this new Insane movie that's coming out and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo will help her. It's tough to craft a career. Now, she could have always pulled a Jennifer Lawrence with Hunger Games and said, guess what, I'm not going to show up to set for season 2 if you don't give me a raise, which is what Jennifer Lawrence did with Hunger Games. And she said, go ahead and sue me and delay the sequel. So she totally reneged on her contract, and the Lionsgate had to pay her more. But Jennifer Lawrence was a much bigger star, and there was a lot more money at stake with the Hunger Games films. And also, I think The Crown out of the gate wasn't, even today, I don't think it's anywhere near Hunger Games level, right? And I think, and also part of Jennifer Lawrence's charm, although I think it's wearing thin right now, is that she's such a tough person, right? But Claire Foy, I think that, you don't want to get a reputation in the industry for being really difficult and holding up projects. And, the bottom line is you're holding up a lot of people's jobs as well. So it's a tough situation. It's really difficult. So that's what I wanted to point out with the payment situation with the Crown. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, especially after I've outlined those other things to you. Now, the viewer question comes from Cody Shelton, and Cody tweeted me yesterday because we've been talking a lot about Netflix movies that were either go to Netflix from the studio or originate there. So Cody says, do you think Hollywood is dumping bad movies to Netflix on purpose? Well, in some cases, with Paramount specifically, yes, I do. They've dumped both the Cloverfield paradox, which was not good. It had its moments, but then also, of course, Annihilation, which I enjoyed, but I think Netflix was an appropriate home for it in many ways. But again, this boils down to leverage. And Netflix right now in the movie space has zero leverage pretty much, right? I mean, after that Cloverfield paradox stunt, I think they got a little momentum, but they just want to pay big money for any big picture movie with big picture talent because they want to have that associated with their brand. So their quality control is real low right now, if not completely turned off. And also, the other situation that's adding to this is that big studios aren't greenlighting mid-range pictures anymore, so there's less opportunity for them. But people who make mid-range pictures still need to work. And, you have to make mid-range pictures to eventually get to big-range pictures, right? I mean, you have to, if you can't get into a blockbuster or a franchise, you have to keep working. So where is that opportunity going to come from? And Netflix has a lot of opportunity these days. Netflix will take mid-range movies, especially with name talent, because again, they need that brand, that name recognition for their brand. And also, because they're so eager to get name talent, Netflix isn't giving as many notes, and they're having huge creative freedom, and that ties into buying into your own hype a little bit too much. And that some creatives go, well, why should I answer to studio notes? Why don't I go to Netflix where they'll let me do what I want to, and my brilliance will finally be realized? And then you have situations like Mute, where you realize that maybe Duncan Jones does need studio notes, and Netflix actually gave him too much creative freedom. They gave him enough creative freedom to hang himself with. So I think that Netflix is doing what it needs to do for itself. I think that they don't want to get a reputation for churning out junk, as Cody has, I think, somewhat said there. And I think that just like I've said with Megan Ellison, I think that this is not a great situation for creatives. I think it's a false positive, because you think you're getting all this money and creative freedom, but in fact you're not getting any guidance. And guidance is a big part of what studios provide. Not only an outside perspective creatively, but keeping an eye on the business things that you need to deliver on that sometimes creatives forget about. Eventually I think Netflix will become more selective with their movies, just like they started canceling series eventually. Like, remember at first they were just greenlighting everything and letting it stay on the air. But they need to find some success in the movie space first before they become more selective. So what do you think? What do you think of Netflix's strategy? How do you think it works out for Netflix? How do you think it works out for Hollywood, in general, in terms of the ecosystem as to what movies go where? And how do you think it works out for talent? Thank you for your question, Cody. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think today's top 3 stories, Cody's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and of course, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.